guy who's usually on in the morning, so it's hard to get rid of that habit. And in some cases, in fact, Dreamland does air in the morning, as it is repeated across this nation. It's good to be here. As the opening told you, we discuss things that are not quite so easily put in a box every week, and that will be the case this week as well. It should be intriguing. Don't you want to know about the origins of the human race? Well, I do, and have for a long time, and we've got a man with another theory this evening, Michael Cremo, and he'll be coming to us all the way from Florida. First, however, as we do every week, coming to us from Philadelphia once again, it is Linda Howe, home once again in Philadelphia. Linda, good evening.
Hi, Art.
Hi. How's everything?
Well, it's been spring today, and I think there's some hope of getting out of all this water and winter that everybody's been coping with, and that's a good step.
Well, everybody in California has the same wish with regard to water.
That's right. And remember back in September, I announced that my book, Glimpses of Other Realities, was going to be carried by Barnes & Noble.
Yes. Well,
dozens of our Dreamland listeners called in frustration to tell me the book wasn't in the Barnes & Noble system then, as I was told it would be. Recently, however, I had the pleasure of walking into a large Barnes & Noble bookstore in Philadelphia and discovering copies of Glimpses displayed on a shelf. So the book is finally and officially in the Barnes & Noble stores and system, and to our Dreamland listeners, if you can't find a shelf copy, all you have to do is order through the computer system. My goal in doing the books and documentaries has been to share with as large a general audience as possible the difficult and complex information about non-human interaction on our planet. So I'm grateful for this larger bookstore connection and hope all our listeners will encourage Barnes & Noble to keep carrying books like Glimpses as we try to deal with this difficult subject.
Hey, Linda, I'm curious. How does it feel to go to a big bookstore and see your own books sitting there?
Well, it was so, to use the phrase, it made my heart sing, because I don't think anybody could possibly know how difficult the last 15 years of my life have been, because I have chosen to explore these subjects.
I'm certain that's true. But, I mean, to see your own work there in a major bookstore must have been a serious thrill.
It was. It is, and I hope our listeners will continue to call on Barnes & Noble and their other bookstores, because the more that people ask for books like Glimpses of Other Realities and Alien Harvest, the more we'll be able to sustain keeping those books in these bookstores.
Sure.
Now, this week I was also a guest on the NBC weekly television show The Other Side, which in this case was a show about investigators of the paranormal. Oh. That program, The Other Side, is broadcast after the morning news show on NBC and is focusing on some of the same subjects that we cover in Dreamland. So I encourage our radio listeners to look for The Other Side in their TV guide. They've asked me to come back, and when I know that next date, I'll let everybody know.
All right, so are you saying it's already aired?
Yeah, it aired this past week, and I did not know precisely the date when we were on last Sunday, and it turned up that it was on that Wednesday, and I've gotten so many calls, and apparently they're going to try to do another show, and I'll for sure find out and let you guys know.
Oh, please. All right.
Now, this past week, I also received a call from a retired police officer named Bill Hill, who worked for 25 years in the Peoria, Illinois Police Department, and then retired to Salmon, Idaho, a very remote wilderness area of northern Idaho. Mr. Hill owned some horses and had bought a new buckskin on January 12th. 2 weeks later, on January 26th, he was shocked to find the horse dead and mutilated. He was very frustrated. He did not know that there were people like myself and Dr. Altshuler and others investigating cases like this, and he finally contacted me this week because he, the law enforcement there, and the veterinarian who examined the horse are completely baffled. This is Mr. Hill's eyewitness account.
When I saw the horse laying there, I saw a large wound in the side of his neck with blood on it, and the blood was still steaming. and the snow was still melting on the horse, so he was fairly warm. So I told her not to go near it, and I backtracked. I didn't go within 10, 15 feet of the horse.
Could you see any tracks on that moist ground?
Absolutely none. It was a fresh snow, and the other horses hadn't been down in that lower pasture, and there were no tracks down there, and there was no tracks when I walked up to it. So we went back to the phone, called the sheriff's department, and a deputy come out, and when he came out, we got our flashlights, and we walked a little closer, and at that time I also observed there was a large patch of skin off the belly towards the rear end, and it was probably a foot to a foot and a half in diameter, and it went around behind the base of the penis, and there wasn't any skin on his penis either.
So it was as if the hide had been removed high deep down to the surface of the muscle, and that the surface hide of the penis was removed also. Right.
It was just the stomach hadn't been penetrated, it hadn't gone into the stomach cavity or anything. It just took the outside layer of skin off there. So my first impression when I saw the hole was that somebody shot it from the highway, and he's a buckskin horse and an elk colored, and during hunting season we have a lot of accidents where cattle and horses are shot, or sometimes it's just vandalism. So when I saw the damage done to the horse, I thought it was strange that if somebody had shot it from a distance, that they would come up this close to our house and do what they did to the horse. This is only about 300 feet from my house. It's out in plain sight, out in the pasture, and it's right across. My neighbor right across the road from me is approximately the same distance. We live on a dead-end road, and the road ends about 300 feet up before where the horse was.
So if anybody had been out there an hour before you arrived, which was broad daylight since the horse was still steaming, you would think that it would have been obvious for someone to be in that pasture with that horse.
They would have had to walk several hundred feet in the open to walk up to this area, and if anybody would have been in our house or at the neighbor's home would have seen it, why, it would have been obvious, and they obviously spent some time down there skinning it and to take the skin off of it for the job that they did. So we made a big circle around the area where the horse was. We walked into the neighbor's pasture between the highway and our place. The highway's about 500-600 feet away, and we made a big loop all the way around, and we walked down into a pasture behind us, and we found no tracks at all, no evidence where anybody had been on the property at all. It probably had been snowing maybe an hour or 2 hours. There was a couple inches of snow on the ground. It was a wet snow, and for the way that the blood was steaming coming out of the hole in the neck, it appeared very warm, and the snow was still melting on the horse. When I looked at it, I didn't really realize it until I went up to the sheriff's office and got the pictures of it today. There was snow underneath the horse, and there was snow in places where the horse couldn't have been laying there, and it snowed over him. There had to have been snow on the ground where the horse was laid down. It was pretty obvious to us that he died right where he dropped. But the only wound that we could see was a hole in the neck.
And this removal of the hide.
Plus the removal of the hide. And so my first thought was that it had been shot in the neck. And the head was taken to a veterinarian here, and they cut it off to examine it. And they x-rayed it, and they could find no bullet fragments or wadding from a shotgun shell or anything inside it. And the veterinarian that autopsied it said that she'd never seen anything like it. It definitely wasn't a gunshot wound. It only went into the neck about 2 to 3 inches, and the x-ray didn't show any lead fragments or anything where a bullet would have done any damage or broken up inside the neck.
And Mr. Hill also learned that the Salmon, Idaho Sheriff's Department received a report about a UFO in the area around the time of the horse's death in January.
Oh, I was going to ask about that, and there it is, the connection.
Yep. And I think that you can't stress enough the bizarre high strangeness of a horse found lying on 2 inches of snow with this kind of a hole in the neck, with the hide in a very clean cut, only hide deep across the belly and taking the skin, even of the scrotum and the penis, very thinly, without any sign of any tracks anywhere in the entire pasture or around that horse, and with no signs of any fluid or any blood on the snow.
Give me a guess.
What do I think happened?
Yep.
Well, I think it fits into these other eyewitness reports that I have brought to Dreamland this past year from people like Mr. McKnight in Oregon, who encountered the mutilated animal out in Sand Springs and found a rancher there who was living in a trailer who described for him how he had seen white glowing spheres in the sky come over the pasture, send down beams of light, had watched animals from the pasture rise in those beams of light, and then when they were returned, they were either returned down the beam of light or were simply dropped from some kind of an object in the sky. And when they dropped, they were there dead with these excisions. Now that could explain what happened to this horse in Idaho. And that is what could explain these other cases where cows have been found on wet sandbars with no tracks around them either.
How about why?
Well, then we get into what I have been trying to investigate for the last decade or so, the motive, the intent behind some non-human intelligence interacting with the plant, animal, and human life on our planet. And as Bud Hopkins keeps walking into the same seeming motive in the human abduction syndrome, genetic harvesting, that is one area that the abductees themselves have said that in the few cases that have involved both abductions and animal mutilations, that they understand that there is a harvesting of genetic material by something off-planet to create some sort of hybrid species that is part life on our planet and part something else out there, and that still does not answer the bigger question, why? Which is what we're all trying to find out.
At least it helps, I guess. All right, Linda, a lot of people want to contact you for various reasons, including your books, your publications, to write you letters, to fax you. So why don't you give us your fax number and your address? Thanks,
Art. I really, really do value the communication I'm getting from the Dreamland listeners. And I am Linda Howe at Post Office Box 538 in Huntingdon Valley, Pennsylvania. That's an English spelling, Hunting, D as in dog, O-N, Huntingdon Valley, PA, zip code 19006. And my fax number is area code 215-491-9842. That is definitely the fax number. And again, Post Office Box 538, Huntingdon Valley, Pennsylvania, 19006.
Excellent. All right. I'm sure you'll get a number of communications from all of this. Once again, fascinating. Thank you, Linda. Next week, Philadelphia?
Yeah, I am going to be in Philadelphia this month till the end of the month, and then I'm going to be going to Tennessee, and I'll be doing reports from there, but I'll let you know.
Excellent.
So I will be here next Sunday, and I agree with you that the forbidden history of man, which is what I think we're dealing with, is going to be one of the continually emerging subjects over the next few years.
My guess as well. Great. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Art.
Take care. Linda Howe. Actually, it is the hidden history of the human race, but my guess is by the time we're done, we'll find out it is forbidden as well, as in forbidden knowledge. Michael Cremo, or is it Cremo, we'll find out in just a second, has written a book called The Hidden History of the Human Race. And basically, I think he is going to suggest that our history as a human species is not as the scientists would have us believe.